On the battlefields of the 21st century, accuracy is not optional. The world's major military powers, like the United States, need to have ways to strike their targets with pinpoint precision, sometimes from literally hundreds of miles away. There's just one problem. The kinds of munitions capable of such precise attacks, like long-range cruise missiles, cost a huge amount of money to make. Joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, JASSMs for example, cost more than $1 million per unit. Tomahawks cost over $3 million each. Even with a military budget of almost $1 trillion, the US can't afford to simply mass-produce such expensive munitions, and it certainly can't afford to waste them. But what if there was another way? A way to transform relatively cheap dumb bombs into deadly cruise missiles with elite levels of range and precision for a fraction of the usual price. There is, and the United States Navy is now exploring this genius approach through 4 new types of precision-guided weapon concepts, potentially expanding and evolving the American arsenal like never before. The idea of turning unguided or dumb bombs into smart, precision-guided munitions isn't new. The US has been using Boeing's Joint Direct Attack Munition (JDAM) guidance kits for several decades, with several 100,000 units produced since 1999. These bolt-on packages are comprised of several components, including aerodynamic tail sections, straight kits, and combined inertial and GPS guidance control units. When affixed to a simple unguided bomb, like a 2,000-pound Mk-84 for example, the JDAM dramatically increases its performance and potential, enabling aircraft to strike fixed ground targets with exceptional accuracy. To be more precise, JDAMs have been proven to improve bomb accuracy to within 16 feet or 5 meters of their intended targets. Plus, since they both use GPS and inertial navigation to strike their targets, they can be used in all weather conditions, unlike dumb or laser-guided weapons, which typically require clear skies for effective usage. JDAMs also have the benefit of compatibility with most US combat aircraft, including F-18 and F-35 fighter jets and B-2 bombers. But perhaps their biggest and best advantage is their affordability. JDAM kits cost between $21,000 and $36,000. That's a tiny fraction of the 7-figure price tags typically attached to cruise missiles. What's more, the US has vast stockpiles of dumb bombs just waiting to be converted into smart, precision-guided munitions and unleashed on the country's enemies. In the 2000s, Boeing took the JDAM concept further, developing the JDAM Extended Range, or JDAMer, a new version of the original JDAM kit that allowed bombs to glide much greater distances of around 45 miles or 72 kilometers. That's 3 times further than the original JDAM, or around the same operational range as M142 HIMARS rockets. It's an impressive distance, but it still pales in comparison to the likes of the JASSM cruise missile, which can travel several hundred miles before striking its targets. Fortunately, Boeing had something else up its sleeve, an even more powerful JDAM kit with a range to truly rival some of the world's best missiles. Introducing the Joint Direct Attack Munition Long Range, or JDAM LR. Boeing first laid out the concept for this kit back in 2010 when it proposed adding a jet engine tail kit to the existing JDAMer package. At the time, the US military showed little interest in the idea, but by 2020, things had changed. Then in April 2026, the US Navy announced it had carried out successful flight tests of the baseline JDAM LR, which, according to Boeing officials, includes a TDI J85 turbojet engine that allows these brand new smart bombs to travel far further than previous models, with a base range of around 200 nautical miles, 230 miles or 370 kilometers, and the potential to go even further. Are we already in World War III? Because depending on what you read, it can feel like we're living in completely different realities. And keeping up with the news isn't the hard part anymore, it's figuring out what's actually true. Take this story covered by nearly 200 sources across the spectrum. It reports the US military says its blockade of Iranian ports has completely halted economic trade within 36 hours. But just one day earlier, another story, mostly covered by nearly 80 sources, most being left-leaning, said marine traffic in the Strait of Hormuz was barely affected on the first day of the blockade. So, which is it? Total shutdown, barely a disruption, or can both be true? That divide in coverage is exactly why we use ground news to help keep us informed on the multiple active conflicts happening around the world. If you only saw one of those headlines, you'd walk away with just one perspective and a completely different understanding of what's going on. Ground news pulls in thousands of news stories every day and organizes them by topic, showing you bias, reliability, and ownership for every source so you can see every angle in one place. One feature we've been using a lot lately is Blind Spot. It shows you stories heavily covered by one side of the political spectrum but barely talked about by the other. No matter where you fall politically, breaking out of the echo chamber gives you a more accurate understanding of what's really happening, and that's incredibly important when it comes to breaking through the fog of war. So go to ground.news/military show or scan the QR code for 40% off the unlimited access Vantage plan. And it brings the price down for less than the price of a cup of coffee. So give Ground News a shot for yourself. The baseline JDAM LR is also set to be the foundation for 3 additional variants of this guidance kit, each with its own benefits and purpose. There's the decoy JDAM LR, for example, the quick strike LR, and the maritime strike LR. The incredible range of these weapons brings the JDAM to a whole new level of performance, allowing the US to turn dumb bombs into highly precise standoff weapons that can be launched from relatively safe locations far from enemy air defenses. The likes of 4th-generation fighter jets and stealth bombers, for example, could launch these weapons against targets deep inside enemy territory without putting themselves at any elevated risk in the process. As US Navy Captain Sarah Abbott, the Precision Strike Weapons Program Manager, explains, as naval air forces in theater continue to rely heavily on JDAM systems, the program recognizes a critical need to provide the fleet with greater standoff range. This new capability allows pilots to engage targets from significantly safer distances, maintaining a tactical advantage in contested environments. And the LR doesn't just bring better range. These new kits are also said to deliver advanced onboard power generation capabilities that would make these bombs significantly smarter, unlocking new features and functionalities, like two-way data links or advanced seeking systems to make each munition even more accurate against moving targets or in environments that are affected by electronic warfare. Now, before we explore the technical specifications and capabilities of the various types of JDAM LR that the Navy could soon have at its disposal, here's a closer look at the actual testing process, which occurred at the Navy's Point Mugu Sea Range just off the coast of California. There, 2 JDAM LRs were launched from US Navy FA-18 Super Hornets during separate test flights. Each weapon traveled roughly 200 nautical miles after separating from its fighter, with one of the tests also involving altitude changes and weapon maneuvering during flight before striking within meters of its intended target. Notably, the bombs were also launched using the existing JDAM interface that's already part of FA-18s and various other aircraft in the US fleet. That matters because it effectively means that the rollout of these JDAM LRs should be both swift and seamless. Aircraft won't need to undergo time-consuming modifications or new system installations. Instead, the new kits can simply be equipped to the many of the tactical and strategic aircraft that have already used JDAMs in the past. The first test reportedly took place on April 1st and involved the JDAM LR flying for 34 minutes using its own turbojet engine power before striking within just a few meters of its intended target. Given that this type of system is typically attached to bombs weighing a minimum of 500 pounds or 226 kilograms, that sort of margin of error is perfectly acceptable, as the explosive blast would still be strong enough to deal significant damage to any nearby structure. A couple of days later, on April 3rd, the second test took place, albeit with a couple of key differences. This time, rather than flying a relatively linear, straightforward path to its target, the JDAM LR was tasked with following a more complex flight profile, which included sudden altitude changes and in-air maneuvers. These kinds of movements would be needed in real-world combat conditions to help these smart munitions evade enemy defenses and have a better chance of reaching their targets. Again, the test was said to be a big success, with the precision-guided munition reportedly covering a similar distance and achieving a similar outcome to the one launched on April 1st. This is incredibly encouraging news. The testing provided clear demonstrations of safe weapon separation, the ability to interface with existing aircraft systems, and controlled, powered free flight and navigation at far greater distances than any pre-existing JDAM system. In other words, it proved that the JDAM LR was no longer just a pipe dream, but a real, functional piece of hardware, ready to transform dumb bombs like Mk-82, 83, and 84s into carrier-based jet-propelled cruise missiles capable of not only flying for hundreds of miles, but doing so at high speeds too. Experts have estimated that the JDAMs used in the early April tests were most likely traveling at around 400 miles per hour, if not more, based on the distance they covered and their recorded flight times. The best part of all is that just like previous JDAM iterations, the JDAM LR is nowhere near as expensive as an actual cruise missile would be. It does come with a higher price tag than the original JDAM and the more advanced JDAMer, with a total system cost estimated at around $200,000 per unit. But when you compare that to the $1 million or more price tags associated with JASSMs and Tomahawks, the difference is clear to see. For the cost of just one JASSM, the US could create 5 JDAM LR bombs. For the same price as a Tomahawk, it could have 10 long-range precision munitions, ready to rain hell down on its enemies. But before we look in greater detail at the unique LR variants that the Navy could soon be working with, if this is the kind of insight you want more of, make sure you're subscribed to the Military Show. We break it down like this every week. Now, the baseline JDAM LR is already extraordinary, with the potential to give once dumb 500 bombs an operational range in excess of 300 nautical miles, or 345 miles, or 555 kilometers. But Boeing clearly intends to push this technology as far as it can, and in a wider range of ways than experts initially imagined. The first of the 3 additional variants of this system is the JDAM LR decoy. As the name implies, this weapon won't actually be used for attacking targets like air defense systems or infrastructure, but is instead designed to confuse the enemy or potentially lead them into wasting their own $1 million missiles to deal with the perceived threat. The decoy LRs swap out the explosive warheads for auxiliary fuel tanks, which can increase their operational range to an extraordinary 700 nautical miles, 805 miles, or almost 1,300 kilometers. The benefits of a munition like this are clear to see. They could be launched in salvos to saturate enemy air defense systems, for example, forcing the opponent to exhaust its interceptors while creating safe corridors for real warheads or manned aircraft to follow behind. Thanks to their size, speed, and range, the decoys would likely appear on radar screens just like real cruise missiles, such as the JASSM, and no enemy would want to take the risk of allowing a missile like that to simply speed on by and strike its target. Even if they think it's a decoy, they still have to take action and bring it down. That would result in wasted time, energy, and resources. So, while the decoy variant may not appear all that important at first glance, it holds far greater value and potential than it seems. The remaining 2 variants, which are both focused on maritime military operations, are perhaps the most impressive of them all. The first is the Quick Strike LR. Just like the baseline JDAM LR, this is actually a natural evolution of an existing system, the Quick Strike ER. The original Quick Strike ER was, in a nutshell, a 2,000-pound general-purpose bomb that was fitted with underwater mine components, including a new fuse, and then attached to the traditional JDAM Extended Range Glide Wing Kit. The result? An enormous underwater mine that can be deployed from distances of 40 miles away from its intended area. Once the munition draws close to its target coordinates, it glides directly toward the water at high speed before impacting the surface and deploying as a naval mine. The mine then slowly sinks down, typically in waterways that are around 300 feet deep or less, and waits for a target to come too close. Its onboard Mark 57 target detection device can then spot the signatures of enemy vessels in the area, but they don't necessarily just detonate right away. They can wait for the perfect moment, differentiating between different kinds of ships or even counting vessels as they pass, only exploding when the time is right to deal maximum damage. Since they're used in relatively shallow bodies of water, like shipping channels, canals, rivers, inland waterways, and harbors, and tip the scales at 2,000 pounds, these massive mines have no trouble sinking even the biggest warships, and just one B-52 bomber is all that's needed to drop up to 12 of these mega mines from dozens of miles away. Now imagine if that range was multiplied several times over. That's where the Quick Strike LR comes in. Here, Boeing upgraded the original glide wing kit seen on the ER version with a turbojet engine, extending the operational range to over 300 miles. The impact of that cannot be understated. In the past, if the US wanted to mine waterways, even with a quick strike system, it still had to send its own bombers and their crews quite close to the target locations, putting them at risk and creating a whole host of logistical challenges. Now, with a quick strike LR, that entire issue is off the table. The US will have the power to mine waterways that are literally hundreds of miles away, operating from friendly or neutral airspace, rather than having to send its crews and billion-dollar bombers behind enemy lines, risking lives in the process. This opens up countless opportunities for the US military, while simultaneously striking fear into the hearts of its enemies as they realize that now, not even their best defended or deepest inland waterways will ever be truly safe again. The final variant of the JDAM LR is the Maritime Strike version, and neither Boeing nor the military has released much specific information about this iteration. However, we can still make an educated guess about its design and capabilities, as it's most likely another example of an upgraded version of a pre-existing system, namely the Air Force Research Laboratory AFRL Quick Sync munition. The Quick Sync builds on the foundations established by the JDAM by introducing additional guidance systems into the base kit. To be more precise, it replaces the nose section of the munition with a multi-mode seeker package that combines radar and infrared imaging capabilities into a single integrated system. What this means is that while conventional JDAMs are usually only effective at striking fixed targets at specific locations, the Quick Sync can use its JDAM guidance systems to reach the general vicinity of a target ship, before switching to its radar and infrared sensors to find and then hone in on the vessel it's supposed to strike. In other words, it works against warships that are on the move. It can actually calculate a ship's direction and rate of travel, adjusting its own trajectory accordingly to successfully collide with the vessel's hull just below the waterline every single time. It's an extraordinary piece of technology, turning what were once relatively basic BLU-109 bombs into world-beating ship killers, with many military experts ranking the Quick Sync among the most destructive anti-ship weapons in existence anywhere in the world today, right up alongside the likes of the Navy's Mark 48 heavy torpedoes. Just like conventional JDAMs, the Quick Sync can be deployed up to 15 miles away from its targets. But if the Navy were to add JDAM LR technology to that same system, suddenly you're dealing with a ship killer that's not only remarkably reliable and precise, but with the range of a cruise missile, using its glide wings and turbojet engine to reach targets that are potentially several hundred miles away. None of this has been officially confirmed, but several experts believe it's the most likely outcome based on what we know so far. On top of all of this, it's worth reiterating that the new JDAM LR technology introduces the ability for these precision munitions to generate their own electrical power thanks to their onboard turbine engines, which they can then use to support additional systems and add-ons such as more advanced seekers, communication links, and more. In other words, with LR improvements, JDAMs are set to become far smarter and significantly more capable than ever before. In addition, while the Navy's testing only involved 500-pound warheads, it's certainly feasible that the JDAM LR kits will also be compatible with warheads of other weights and classes. Based on that, one might assume that the old-fashioned JDAMs might be on the way out, but that's almost certainly not going to happen. There's plenty of room in the Navy's arsenal for all of these systems, the original JDAMs, the ERs and the LRs to coexist, as each one has its own distinct benefits and features. The originals and ER systems, for example, are much cheaper to make than the new LRs, and are still ideal for relatively short-range applications or in areas that aren't heavily defended by radars and missile batteries. The LRs, meanwhile, will be added to America's growing arsenal of standoff weapons, which tend to be most effective when used by more vulnerable aircraft in the opening stages of a conflict, when enemy air defenses are still online and operational. This is why it's so advantageous that all JDAM systems can work on the same aircraft, and teams can easily install and remove different types of JDAMs quickly and efficiently, making life a lot easier for US commanders and a lot harder for America's enemies for generations to come. And JDAM LRs aren't the only thing that the US Navy has been testing of late. Watch this video to see how the world's leading naval force has also started equipping aircraft carriers with science fiction-style laser systems to blast enemy drones out of the air. Alternatively, check out this video for a look at how the US Air Force deployed a top-secret spy drone into the skies over Iran, ushering in a whole new era of warfare in the process. And finally, make sure to subscribe to the Military Show for more breaking news and insightful analysis of the latest military innovations and conflicts around the globe.